keyboard to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
They may call me the Prophet, but in my life outside of the business of esports, I have worked on the investment side of the table for the better part of the last 2 decades. The single fastest growing area of gaming and esports is gambling. It's booming right now. You don't need to be a prophet like me to see that. However, as an investor, I've stayed away from gambling and betting companies because of the reputational risk and often shady nature of the companies involved. This was true until now. I've recently bought stock in a new public company called Esports Entertainment Group, or EEG, which is focused on esports and gambling. The big difference that changed my mind is that EEG is a public company, NASDAQ listed, and fully regulated, focused on esports betting. The regulatory and audit requirements of a public company are key in my mind to provide the needed transparency for players, bettors, and investors. I had an opportunity to host the CEO of EEG on this podcast a couple of months ago, and I was very impressed by his vision for the company. We've stayed in touch, and I'm delighted to announce that they've accepted to become a sponsor of the podcast. If you're a family office, institutional investor, or investor of any kind, really, Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GAMBLE, GMBL, might be one of the best ways to get exposure to the esports betting space and gaming in general. Make sure to check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. Having said that, I need to make sure to state that this is only my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor or selling stock in the company. Please make sure you do your own research and seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for leaving the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for telling your friends. If you haven't, do these things. Go leave a 5-star rating and review. Tell your friends about the podcast. Buy the book of esports. Go buy our merch, businessofesports.shop. All these things help other people to find the podcast, spread the word, get more people involved in the industry, knowledgeable about what's going on. This is what we love to do, and thank you guys for being a part of it. William, this is our official, episode right before Christmas.
Yeah,
so
this is our holiday. Yeah. Although we might also have some bonus holiday content, TBD.
We do have some bonus holiday content.
Wait, you're spoiling it now? We're not gonna there will be some bonus holiday content.
Oh no, you want to tease it? We're teasing it. We're not spoiling it. This is like. Yeah. Stay tuned. You're going to see bonus content for the holidays.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. Stay tuned. Yeah.
But this is our official sort of Christmas episode. So, how are you going? How are you doing from a getting ready for the holidays perspective? What's been going on with you?
Oh, okay. So we're going straight off of the business angle and going to, no, I'm kidding. No, it's always tough. I think everybody probably listening to this podcast right now knows that, right before the year stops, right? And that's essentially what it is for the holidays. It really is the end of December period. It does go a little quieter, right? I found that in every job I've ever had in my life, right? But, there is a price to pay for that lull. and it's everybody packs everything in right before the lull. And so I very much feel I'm in that crunch right now. As I'm sure many people, actually, hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, you guys will be out of the crunch. You'll be in the lull and be enjoying yourself. But yeah, it's a sprint to the end of the year. I always feel like, but it's worth it. I mean, I've this year has had ups and downs for everybody. Myself personally, I think for many people who've listened, but overall, I feel like it. I look back at 2020 and look, obviously, I'd like to have been able to go outside, like I would have, there's a lot I would have changed, but at the end, I am grateful for 2020. I always try to be happy to be alive and to make the most of what's going on in my life. And at the end of the year, I do feel that way. And I hope many people listening can feel that way, despite what I think has been a tough year for everyone. So,
I mean, I think it's interesting as a consequence, though, of this crunch, if you want to call it, is that basically now there's a ton of esports news. Like you would think this would be slow, that we would have nothing to talk about on this episode. The reality is we had too many topics. There's literally so much. I don't know how we're even going to fit even a small percentage of it in, but we're going to try, William. We're going to try and make this a good Christmas episode with some fun topics. We tried not to pick anything too terribly negative. Cyberpunk kind of is going to ruin that.
We got to talk about Cyberpunk.
We have to talk about it some more.
Sorry, guys.
But we tried to pick topics to end or go into the holiday here on a high note. So let's start with a huge number here, William. This, when we see huge numbers like this, it's hard to ignore. It's impossible to ignore. We have to cover it. Yeah. And this first story is from TechCrunch, and it's all about Discord. The headline here is Discord confirms raising $100 million at a valuation of $7 billion. I will say that what's interesting about this is they had just raised $100 million earlier in the year, like literally in July. So this is a $200 million raised on the year. In July, when they raised the $100 million, it was at a $3.5 billion valuation. So literally in 6 months, the value of the company on paper has doubled. And what they're saying is that this is going to be the pre-IPO round. The company will have now raised a total of $420 million. And this is sort of the last private round before the company expects to go public. That's how they're framing this anyways. I mean, what do you think of this? It's a huge number. We can't deny that these numbers are massive.
It's huge success. And, for this business, I think it's great for the industry to have an outcome, because this is, you don't raise this much money and then not go public, right? So this is
someone could buy you, but at this point, they're too valuable on paper. Yeah. Like the number of buyers at this point are really only the big tech companies. And look, Slack just got purchased for $27 billion. You could argue Discord is a Slack competitor in some ways, right?
Particularly because, if you're talking about like that type of privatized exit, isn't Tencent an investor in Discord? I think they are, right?
It says previous investors have included, Tencent, you're right.
Yeah.
Greylock, IVP, Spark Capital, Tencent, and Benchmark.
Yeah, I'm almost sure Tencent invested. And you have to wonder, like, they're a business that's big enough. Would they take 100% bite of this like they did of Riot Games?
But why? I don't think so.
I agree with you, because owning 100% of a brand or a large share of a branded company is different than a platform or infrastructure play like this, right? Like this is, I think you want the visibility, you want the seat at the table, you want the access. They have all that, right? But it could happen. But I agree with you. It's going to go public. I don't see a logical acquirer for an asset at this price, right? On the private market.
I mean, I do.
Okay.
I do. Well, Microsoft has Teams, right? Who bought Slack? Salesforce bought Slack, right? Yep. So they have a sort of iron in the fire from a collaboration, communication kind of standpoint, right?
Yep.
Google doesn't have a good answer for any of these things. There's Google Meet that's pretty crappy. No one really uses it. Zoom is kicking their butt.
Tell us how you
this
really
is
feel about the Google Service Suite, Paul. Like,
no, I mean, I use it, but
yeah.
everyone ends up doing video calls on Zoom or other
Well, what
things
about
because the Google.
Amazon? Amazon has Chime, right? Isn't that Amazon's like teleconferencing service?
I don't know. I've never used it,
Well,
but
I have to.
this could be logical for Amazon and
Yeah.
integrate it with Twitch, right? Amazon or Google here are very logical acquirers.
And Twitch has a legacy of purchasing these types of companies. They bought Curse, right? Didn't they buy
They
the
did buy
communications
Curse,
platform
which
Curse? So
they haven't done much with. Actually, they haven't
yeah.
done anything with.
Well, maybe they were waiting to pair it with Discord.
But no. So you could see an outcome here where pick a number, right? Amazon or Google pays $20 billion for Discord.
Yep, sure. I could. But my gut is you don't position it as a pre-IPO round unless the pitch for the investment was we're going to IPO this thing. Yes, there could be a last minute angel buyer that swoops in, pays a great price, amazing outcome. But I do think this is going to hit the markets. And I think this is going to be one of the big IPO stories we're talking about in 2021. And I think it's incredible for esports because, and I know it's difficult to say Discord is pure esports, right, versus gaming, but realistically, it's the way you communicate with your teammates during competitive games. So I think it's fair to talk about esports as a Discord as an esports property, right? Realistically, this is probably going to be one of the first big, really esports driven public offerings that's going to come to the market, right?
I think that's where you lose me a little bit.
Okay.
Right? Like today, so the numbers in the article say they just hit 140 million monthly active users. This is double the number it had a year ago. So this is huge growth, right?
Amazing growth.
And for sure, Discord targets gamers and the gamer community. These are its roots. This is where it started, right? But here's fundamentally my hot take. No one puts $200 million in the same year in this company at a $3.5 billion, then $7 billion valuation, thinking this is just going to be a platform for gamers to communicate while they compete, right? At a $7 billion valuation, this is now a Microsoft Teams /Slack /Zoom competitor, and they are looking for the big IPO, right? The 25 billion plus IPO or the 20 to 25 billion dollar private acquisition, right? This is now the realm in which Discord is playing, and fortunately or unfortunately, this has now grown far beyond gamers.
But I would say to you, right, like that's in a way that's what it proves my point, because like at a certain point you get big enough and successful enough as a company that you have to be more than the gaming market, right? Like the gaming market's enormous.
You don't have to be, right? I'm sure the founders of Discord would have been super happy if they had stayed. But pretend we're in an alternate reality, right? There is some alternate reality where the founders of Discord appeal just to gamers. The software is way better than it actually is today, right? And it's super targeted to gamers, and they sell the business for like $1 billion or $500 million. Those guys are super happy, right? Like that's not a bad outcome.
All these gaming infrastructure plays reach beyond gaming, right? Like Twitch. Like Twitch went just chatting. They had Julia Child on. They all try, right? The question will be, does Discord have roots as a Zoom competitor? Does Discord have roots as a Slack competitor, right?
Yep.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I do a lot of business over Discord. However, I'm in esports. So like, I don't think it's typical of how most people do office communications today,
Yes, but like I've always tried to use Slack because it's kind of the startup thing, right? And I hate it. It's a horrible piece of software.
I hate Slack too. Oh my
that
God!
Company
thank you for
isn't
saying
worth
that.
$1. Never mind $27 billion.
I
right?
can't believe. You're like the first person. They're the first person I've ever met who doesn't like Slack as well. Slack drives me crazy.
Right, and so I make my employees use Discord because I like using Discord. Right, but the irony of it all is Discord is also kind of a horrible piece of software. Like it's really not as good as it could be, but it's still 10 times better than Slack. And I think it will pick up with the mainstream audience just because it's new and cool. And I think it will start making its inroads in kind of this tech startup world. And this is where most of these things really take off in a big way.
Well, we'll see what happens. But I mean, either way, like this is definitely one to watch. I think this is not the last big news story we have about Discord. And I think as a halo on the space, regardless of whether or not Discord gets a privatized buy, gets a private buyer or goes public, or I think the valuation, like clearly it's getting valued on MAU. Clearly the MAU is growing astronomically. I expect this is a really good news story for our industry as a whole, even if it grows beyond the gaming industry.
You know what's not mentioned in the article, William?
What?
And it's a private company, so you can't expect it. Revenue. No revenue number at all. Zero.
That was what I said. Clearly it's valued on MAU. Did you not catch that?
I did.
Like,
this is also kind of what's interesting here. And it's a little bit reminiscent of like tech in the late 90s, where it sort of didn't matter if you had any revenue, just building the user base was good enough. And tech goes through these cycles, right? Like the late 90s, no one cares about revenue. It's all about users. Then sort of early 2000s, mid 2000s, all of a sudden everyone wants revenue, right? And user base less so. And now all of a sudden we're back to this, like, who cares about revenue? This is all about users.
To be fair, though, I think Discord is particularly egregious on the revenue front. Because have you ever given Discord $1?
Zero.
Okay, I mean that's the point right there. Is I get that you can.
I don't even get Nitro. Like, I don't know what you get for it.
I don't think they know what you get for Nitro. They can't sell it to you. They have pop-ups like, you should buy Nitro, and then there's like, you're like, why? And they're like, there's a sticker, and you're like, not gonna happen. Like, no, I mean, I seriously think that is the risk with Discord. Is, you're right, they are definitely getting valued on users and traction, and I suspect that's part of what's forcing them to move mainstream, because like, I get how Slack was free for, like, I get how Slack monetizes when it's paired into Salesforce as a business solution. Maybe that's how Discord is going to have to monetize too, and that is going to force it beyond just a gaming space. But yeah, I will say, like, as a free tool, like, it is a bit like, come on guys, like, when are you ever going to offer something that's an add to the core Discord platform that makes you want to spend? Because I've been using Discord for 3 years and I've never once been hit with a promotional offer, and I would describe myself as a heavy user. Like, I've never once been hit by a promo offer that has made me think, oh good, that's worth 99 cents.
Yep, agreed. So we'll see what happens. This is like William said, definitely one to watch. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Discord IPO next year, assuming the markets stay frothy. We will most likely see a very, very richly priced Discord IPO next year.
Ooh, I can't wait. Yeah.
Let's move on, William. Let's move on to a topic that you and I have discussed, I would say, in volumes over the years.
Let's do it.
But the headline here was just too catchy. It was the clickbait worked here. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And this is from observer.com. And the headline here is, video games will soon be Hollywood's next great IP war. I'll just read the first paragraph. The litany of failed video game adaptations across the big and small screens have been infamous Hollywood subplots, from 1993's disastrous Super Mario Brothers through 2016's underwhelming Warcraft. Don't even get me started on that one. You can't stroll through recent entertainment history without tripping over the carcass of a high-profile flop. But like a gamer stuck on a particularly challenging level, there's nothing for Hollywood to do except keep trying. So the article goes on to talk about how cross-platform cinematic universes like Marvel and all these things are all the rage. They need more and more IP to keep it afloat. They talk about like comic book ones like Blade, X-Men, Spider-Man, but they also make reference to a lot of video game ones like Halo, Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil, Assassin's Creed, all these video games. And so what they're saying is, not only is the video game industry, 3 times bigger now, or 3+ times bigger than the movie industry, but almost all the great IP is coming out of video games, and this is where Hollywood has to pluck from. Obviously, as part of that conversation, we're talking about Disney. We're talking about obviously the Netflixes of the world, anyone creating original content and needing IP. William, I know you have lots of interesting thoughts on this front. You have lots of strong feelings. For you, Disney is kind of the ultimate company.
Disney's like literally all companies evolve to Disney. I really believe that. Like Disney is the final form. You know, like how Pokemon go through evolutions over time. It's like all Pokemon eventually evolve into Disney. That's like how it works. Like anyway.
Like, well, you say that a lot of times. Can I just? I want to put you on the spot on this one.
Yeah.
You're saying that means eventually, right? The perfect company becomes a holder of IP, a creator of TV, movies, music, and games, a runner of theme parks. Like is this? Am I taking your comment too literally here?
Yeah, you're taking it too literally. Like what I'm saying is the greatest companies end up just managing brands. Like the truly best of the best companies, they might have to execute certain businesses within that branded vertical because they think it's owned and control and crucial to developing the brand. And that's why Disney makes movies, right? It's not that they want to be in the movie business. It's if they want to maintain their brands, they think controlling the movie production pipeline is important, right? They think they need to be the ones telling those stories. They can't outsource it. Theme parks are the same reason, by the way. Like, why? It makes no sense. Why should Disney run theme parks? It's silly, right? Except you think of it as the ultimate brand touchstone engagement, life affinity building experience. They need to control that, right? So yeah, I think it's not that good companies look like Disney. There's other portfolios of activities you evolve, but all ultimate companies recognize that they're running a brand or brands, not a suite of individual, not like an activity portfolio, but a branded portfolio. And they change how they manage their business from a suite of activities to a suite of brand activations and investments. And that's what Disney does incredibly well. And I just like the more you study Disney, the more you fall in love with them. Like they're arguably, it's arguable to say they were the first. They might not even have been the first, but they perfected the blueprint. And that's why many public companies will say they want to be like Disney. And it's not just the market cap, it's a phenomenal business model. So yeah. Now, but back to this story. Yeah, back to this story.
So let me reframe the question from this story here. Okay. You could argue that the last IP war that was fought in Hollywood was around comic books, right? It was Superman, Spider-Man, X-Men, right? You had Wonder Woman, you had all of these comic book adaptations in movies, and all the big players, the Disneys, the Warner Brothers, the Netflixes, they were all fighting over this IP coming from the comic book world. The headline here is video games will be the next great IP war among these Hollywood companies. Do you think there's truth to that?
Well, they don't have a choice. Like there's just like I literally like it's yes, there is, and it's because all the big engagement is coming out of gaming today. Like literally, like what's the option? Like they've mined all the lower tier IPs, they've mined comics, they've mined fiction. Like look, all the big movies are a high risk game, right? Like let's be honest. So to de-risk movies, they go with established stories, characters, plots, and fan bases. That's how films have evolved, right? So the concept, that's why it's so exciting to see somebody like a Christopher Nolan who can do a blockbuster original movie, right? Like that's such a big deal. Like, oh my gosh, Christopher Nolan can make Tenet or, you know, all this other stuff. Like we're so surprised because it is so rare to actually see an original story coming straight to the big screen. And it's a de-risking process. And so, yeah, just given the eyeballs, the affinity, the reach, of course, movie studios are going to have to de-risk this way. And that's why, despite all these flops, they keep doing it because they don't have a choice but to figure it out. It's too rich of a well. And so it's like this hill that like some studios are going to have to suffer through. Like it's miserable. They clearly don't know how to do good game to movie adaptations. Now, I think a lot of that is because they just don't actually adapt. They just take the same title, cough, cough, Monster Hunter, and then are like, oh, let's tell a totally unrelated story, but say it's a video. Like, so I think a lot of it is how they approach it. But nonetheless, it's clearly a real issue for them. But it's one they have to solve because once there is a formula, like comics got a formula through Marvel. And by the way, comics weren't a great adaptation history for a long time, right? They weren't the rich well of modern cinema they were today. Like,
you mean Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles wasn't
hey, that was great. Shut up. That was
The
great.
greatest movie
I loved
you
it.
ever
I
saw.
loved them all. Turtle power. Do you remember the rap, the turtle rap? T by Vanilla Ice.
No.
Anyway, they did. They had that. That was the best part of the movie.
They had that. So, but that's an interesting hot take, William, right? That fundamentally the Hollywood studios need two things, right? They need the gamer audience to de-risk their big budget movies, and they need sort of the well of great stories and IP that gaming has to just create new movies again without having to write new stories.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that both of those things seems to not guarantee success anyways, right? Like you can still have a flop in Hollywood without those two things. And furthermore, I feel like this is a change from where Hollywood used to be, right? When they were the more dominant form of media, you saw things going in reverse, right? People would create video games from the movies, right? A movie would launch with an accompanying video game and not vice versa, right? Now, I think part of the dynamic is a power dynamic that has shifted where the video games are creating the original IP. They're the ones generating the audiences, and Hollywood's just sort of tagging along for the ride. Whereas in the past, it used to be the opposite.
Yeah. But I mean, I the irony too, Paul, by the way, is games are going to go this way as well. Like I'm just telling you, like the phenomenon that we are struggling with movies, which is why can't you have a high concept original film because it's too risky, is exactly where games are going. And that's why you see like Call of Duty 4 being the big story after Call of Duty 3. And that's why you see all the innovation in the indie game space where it's low cost. And like, this is how these high cost industry, the games are no different than film like that. And I think eventually we'll get to a point where all the big games are adaptations of comic books or novels or short stories or blogs, like lower cost industries, or most of them, because that's how the de-risking works. And in fact, and we're going to touch on this podcast, we have a very clear example of why original material is hard to do. Cyberpunk, right? Like the risks of that are writ large. And ironically, Cyberpunk was actually based off of a role-playing game. Now, the problem there is that there was no established audience, or I mean, I shouldn't dismiss it, but it was not a Dungeons and Dragons level role-playing game, but it was actually based off something. But anyway, yeah.
I mean, it's a great segue because we do have 3 related stories, or actually 4 around Cyberpunk. So let's dig in, William. Let's dig into Cyberpunk. We talked about it last week. We didn't have any data. Okay. Before we dig in, I want to show you one story. It's because it's sort of different from the rest. And this story, it's as if I had written it, and which is why I want to talk about it. I kind of want to preface the business discussion with my opinion. And so this one is, yes, Cyberpunk 2077 is buggy, but mostly it has no heart. And the subheadline is exactly my feelings. People misunderstand why I dislike the game. It's not the bugs, it's that everyone in it sucks. And what I love about it, there's just one in the conclusion that that I particularly loved. I mean, he really sort of breaks down everything that's wrong with the game. It says it feels like it misses the point. Cyberpunk's rhythms are different due to the source material. Blah blah blah. He says, I hate all of the characters, even the ones I can tell I'm supposed to like. Unlike The Witcher's goofy songster pal Dandelion, my cyberpunk sidekick Jackie Wells has no endearing characteristics besides dubious loyalty to V and lukewarm affection for someone named Misty. And he says, I can't keep track of the convoluted storyline. I have no idea what actions might help or hurt the eventual outcome. Everything feels like I'm just killing time until Keanu's character, Johnny Silverhand, takes over my head. I also hate Johnny Silverhand. I know I'm supposed to hate him, but you're also supposed to feel drawn to his charisma because Keanu. But I don't. I feel no sympathy for this spoiled, aging kid whining for cigs and his dumb 90s leather leggings that might have been cool 20 years ago, but now look like something a Mormon mommy blogger might wear to get Christmas pictures taken at the strip mall. I blindly follow the quest tracker because I don't know what else to do, but I don't know why I'm supposed to be doing any of this. Anyways, the author here actually, sorry, I was saying Adrian So totally rips this apart. And I love it. I think it's the best review of the game. You should go check out Adrian's review of the game on wired.com. But we have 3 stories now that are more business related because numbers are now out. And let me read the headlines and then we'll talk about it. Sony removed Cyberpunk 2077 from PlayStation Store after complaints. Both Sony and Microsoft said they would also offer refunds to gamers while the developer of the much hyped title works to fix bugs and glitches. That was from the New York Times. Then Yahoo Finance says Cyberpunk fiasco is going to make gaming more expensive. And Bloomberg says Cyberpunk fails to deliver again as game sales disappoint. The studio's shares are down 40% since December 4th. That's insane. And Morgan Stanley actually also downgraded the stock, which is to be expected. So
yeah, a little late to the party there, Morgan.
Lot to unpack here, William. I don't know if you want to start talking about this disappointing sales. They've sold 13 million copies, but analysts were expecting, I think, a lot more. In fact, the estimates from analysts says they would sell 16.4 million, and they only sold 13 million. So, we're still talking about a lot of copies, but then you put that against all the refunds, the first time ever Sony pulling a game from its store. Like these are firsts that you don't want to see.
Yeah, I mean, like 13 million is an incredible number of copies to sell. And even if there's a 30% return window, that's still 10 million. Like the problem with Cyberpunk is still expectations. That's a big piece of this here is like 10 million is a really great total for a game to have in basically a week from launch, 2 weeks from launch, right? Like that's really impressive. Like the issue is, people thought it would do so much more because the expectations were out of hand. So it's a good selling game. It's people are playing it, right? It's it's just you had an entire company's future hinging upon the success of one title. I will say now that I played it for more like 20, 25 hours now, I can tell you I have soured on it more, right? Like a lot of the issues I was willing to overcome or overlook earlier in the life cycle of the game, and what was taking place there, like I now don't feel interested in overlooking them anymore. Like the lack of choices, the limited character and story development, like all of those things now that like I thought the game was going to grow or build out of, like I now recognize, like I feel the game feels incomplete to me. It feels like the development was rushed, which is crazy to say about a 7-year game. But it also goes to sort of the bigger piece, which is, look, do I think because I'm surprised Sony pulled the game. I'll be honest with you. I think Sony pulled the game more because of the volume of fan complaints and the fan like tied against the game than because of an actual reason to pull the game, right? Like I think there are games that launch in much worse states than Cyberpunk, right? Yes, I know.
But not with millions of people having paid for it.
The
right?
problem, the games that launch in worse states than this have like 100,000 people playing them and get 10,000, get 1,000 complaints, right? Cyberpunk has 10 million people playing it and gets 100,000 complaints. Sony has to respond in a way. But again, it's a little bit a victim of expectations, right? Like I think ironically, if this game had been underhyped and fewer people had bought it and all of those things, like I don't think it would be pulled from the store right now. But the bigger thing is the business implication here, guys, which is look like this is why studios have more than one franchise coming to market in a given year. We said this last podcast, but like this is why no sports team has ever built a successful career on being first every season, because you can't do it. Sports teams can't do it. The same for creative industries. No author, no movie studio, has built a legacy based on every movie is the best movie ever. Every book is the best-selling, greatest book of all time. Like sometimes you miss. That's the beauty of creative industries. There's risk involved. You're doing something original. But this is why large companies de-risk. The theme of this podcast should be de-risking, right? This is why large companies de-risk their portfolios with lots of different titles, just like Tencent invests in lots of different publishers in the esports industry, right? So they can weather a couple flops because on the margins, they'll succeed more than they fail and the business will grow. And CD Projekt did not do that. They believed in themselves. Good for them. They put all the eggs in one basket. This is why businesses don't follow the one basket strategy.
I just want to put this up, William, because there's good discussion to be had here. So this was from the Bloomberg article, and they had world's best sellers here. Okay, so all the best-selling games of all time: Minecraft #1, 200 million copies; Grand Theft Auto 5 #2, 135 million copies. I think the expectations for Cyberpunk were in that like Grand Theft Auto kind of territory. Truly, right? That was the kind of hype that was building around the game. That was the hype around the stock, right? But now, I mean, with all the negative feedback, with it being taken off the store, refunds being offered, the lower than expected number of copies sold, it's looking like Cyberpunk won't even catch The Witcher 3, which is another CD Projekt Red game, right? They won't even catch their game from 2015 is what it's looking like. I don't know if you see it differently, but this in spite of the millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue the game will generate, you still have to kind of call this a pretty massive flop if it doesn't even catch The Witcher 3. And not just a flop of expectations at that point. Because I was with you, right? This is a failure of expectations. But now that we have some numbers around it, this is looking like a true failure, period.
Well, it's also a failure, I think, a little bit of market potential. Because I think what you see here, if you look at this chart that you have here, what you see is that the RPG market is capped out, right? Like an RPG has never sold more on your list that you called up than 30 million copies with Elder Scrolls Skyrim, right? If you look at the titles that do sell to like hundreds of millions plus, it's much more mainstream games like Grand Theft Auto, Minecraft, to a lesser extent like Pac-Man, PUBG. That was another thing that I had sort of said about CD Projekt Red is I said, look, guys, you have to understand the TAM that your game addresses is not the TAM of like the games industry. Like RPGs are a niche, let alone aggressively crazy dark cyberpunk RPGs, right? Like that doesn't mean it's not beautiful and artistic and a lot of people won't play it, but you're not exactly, going to be on ESPN with that approach, right?
Yeah. And TAM for our listeners, William, means total addressable market. The other question I had for you is, and this is from the article here, the first one that I showed, where Yahoo says Cyberpunk fiasco is going to make gaming more expensive. Where fundamentally their take is, if there's risk, and like you said, the theme of this podcast is de-risking. If there is risk around a game being a success, right, and you've spent years developing it, millions of dollars to build it, and there's a chance it's going to be a big flop like Cyberpunk, instead of selling a $60 box game that people pay, not like, and can return, Yahoo's article here is saying basically everything's going to move to basically a live service or subscription service where the game maker at least has a chance to fix it and continue generating revenue over a period of time, which you will end up spending more than the $60 you would have spent for the box game up front. So their thesis is that bad games and huge failures like Cyberpunk are going to force developers' hands to go to more recurring revenue streams and subscription models.
And not to say like read my book, but if you read my book, like that's the entire thesis, is the single purchase, or not the entire thesis, that's an important part, is like the single purchase box copy model is a terrible revenue model to be on. Like the industry has invented better models. So
I mean, it's good for the consumer, right? Arguably, because maybe you spend less over time. And in a world where stores are offering refunds, which for video games is not the norm, not recently, right? Especially not with digital goods, even with physical like CD copies. It used to be, if you activated it with the code, the retailer wouldn't take it back. GameStop came out and said, we're going to take back Cyberpunk 2077 copies, literally.
A huge question about what GameStop, like I would have expected them to have dug in here.
Yeah. But we're seeing in
GameStop
that refund
like,
model.
Once you walk in the store, you bought it. Like that's the.
But in some ways, it's good for the consumer, right? Especially in a world where refunds are okay. I didn't like the game didn't run well, I should get my money back. As a consumer, I kind of like that.
But this is why, like, microtransactions, like, don't pay anything for the game, try it and give us 99 cents every so often if you keep enjoying it. Subscription, World of Warcraft, don't, or the modern subscription, don't pay us $10, try it for a month. If you don't like it, don't pay us anymore. If you do like it, pay us another $10. Like, when I looked at CD Projekt Red before this, like, my take on CDPR objectively was, one title studios don't work, let alone one title studios on a bad or a dated business model. This is not like Riot Games, which was a one title studio on a good business model, the microtransaction model, right? This is a one title studio on an even more risky, highly levered single time sale model, right? So now the only reason why a year ago I wasn't, calling for the CD Projekt Red, it's a bad move, don't do it, is because I believed. I gotta be honest with you, I believed, right? Like, it is very appealing to get caught up in the narrative of creative genius, authorship, independence, focus, right? Like discipline. And CDPR said all the right things. We'll ship it when it's ready. We're committed to launching this one game at a time. They had me believing, right? And I think they had a lot of people believing. And
you have a funny feeling that they were drinking their own Kool-Aid too, right, William?
I'm sure they were.
Right? Like, we're the Witcher guys, we're geniuses. This game, it has to be great, I
had no idea they were like one dialogue choice per conversation, and it's not a choice, it's just yellow or white, and the white stalls the conversation until you pick yellow, and they're like, it's genius. We've streamlined dialogue. This is what it's always wanted to be. Like, this is how it should evolve. Like, I guarantee you, like, I'm being facetious, but I definitely get the sense that the issue with Cyberpunk, in my mind, and this is a little, again, against your, but like, the systems were developed in isolation of each other. Like, I don't see a lot of overlap between, say, like, the equipment system and the hacking system, or the driving system and the weapon system, right? Or the driving system and the level progression system. That's a better example. Like the systems, it feels like they built a world, they put stuff in it, and then they started to design systems around things that you should be able to do in the world. And nobody ever knitted it all together in the way that, like, the great BioWare RPGs were in the past. And again, this is not a games criticism podcast, but it feels to me like the real thing that's missing in Cyberpunk is interdependence, which is, I think, what would give the game, you say it's not more of an RPG, I think interdependence, like having a higher hacking skill, giving you hacking options during conversations, right? Like, I think the lack of RPG-ness is really a lack of interdependence in the systems made manifest, right?
Yep.
So, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I definitely think, and to me, that seems like the game didn't bake long enough. Like, I just, which is weird because it's in development for 7 years, but I'm extremely suspicious that this game actually had a 7-year full development cycle based on playing it, because I just think over time, naturally, you merge the systems, right? So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's not good for CDPR, and it's not good for the games industry, but hopefully it teaches, it'll teach me a lesson. Unfortunately, it's like the death of innocence. It's the last time I'm going to believe in the authorship, because I knew, and I didn't say anything. In fact, I didn't, it's not even saying anything. I believe too. I was like, yes, that applies to everybody but these guys.
For the record, I didn't believe. I was always a skeptic, as I almost always am. I just want to end on this one thought. It felt a little bit like in the drinking of their own Kool-Aid, that these guys felt like they were Take-Two Interactive level. And it highlights for me how hard it is what Strauss Zelnick and Take-Two Interactive actually managed to do. Because, they do have multiple games, but really they are more of a one game at a time, kind of studio, and still on a traditional $60-$70 box copy kind of model, right? And yet they continue to put out great game after great game. And so it almost gives others hope. But I truly think that this is the exception to the rule. This is not the norm. What they managed to do has been truly exceptional. Now, there's no guarantee GTA 6 is going to continue that, and I will always be a skeptic. But it does highlight how hard it is that what they managed to do, because it's not easy.
But I will urge you though, like there's a great YouTube video that compares Red Dead Redemption 2 to Cyberpunk, and it shows you similar systems and how they work, like in the games. And that is like a real moment that I think you'll see. Like there's a lot more going on under the hood with RDR than Cyberpunk. Like even as simple as the targeting
Yep.
systems. Like look at how there's a whole targeting system in Red Dead Redemption where there's a nice visual framework for where you aim. You see the body parts get blown off, which is a little graphic for the podcast. Sorry, but there's ragdoll reactions. There's a payoff mechanic built around targeting multiple body parts, and so there's all of these things. Clearly, somebody thought and developed a system around targeting. Cyberpunk also has targeting. There's headshots and body shots, and there's not really a payoff for it. Like I don't see unique animations for one or the other. Like it's like you should probably try to aim for the head, but sometimes you can't. Like
you're talking about the 5 minutes of combat that you play in the
exactly,
40 hours
in a
story.
40-hour mission where it's like, but the point I'm making is like, it does go to show you that like, and I'm not the biggest RDR fan. I get bored playing the RDR games. I find they don't have enough of a progression system. I'll be the first to say it. But like you can see the artistry that went into it and the way the systems were developed. And that's what I mean. You don't see the same development of the CDPR systems in this game. So anyway, we got to get off this. We got to get back onto business, but there we go.
Let's talk about another recurring story that comes back this week, William, and this is from 9to5mac.com. I couldn't believe it when I saw this, that this is what Epic is now up to and using their resources on. And so the article headline is Epic Games continues free Fortnite campaign with Apple-inspired press pack sent to influencers. So the gift comes in a white box that mimics Apple's product boxes. Inside, there's a custom jacket with the free Fortnite slogan and a logo that somehow resembles the Apple logo with its design and even the colored stripes. In addition to the jacket, the kit sent to influencers comes with a brand new Galaxy Tab 7, which is one of the iPad rivals. And there's also a letter written by the Epic Games team in the box that says, although users can no longer find Fortnite on App Store or Google Play, the game remains available on the Samsung Galaxy Store. I can read the letter. It says, "Hi there. Fortnite was named the Samsung Galaxy Store Game of the Year for 2020. What an honor. In celebration, we've teamed up with Samsung to send you a special box of free Fortnite gear. While Fortnite may not currently be available on the App Store or Google Play, you can still get the latest Fortnite updates directly from the Epic Games app on the Galaxy Store. Spread the word. #free Fortnite." So the battle continues.
I'm sorry, I have to call it out. How sad is it that Samsung is being used to basically in an anti-Apple ad? Like they're just so dragged along in this. It's like we so badly want to be on the App Store. Like, please let us back on. Also, Samsung likes us, so they're here. Like it feels so ungrateful to Samsung.
It does a little bit, right? Like, Fortnite is free on Samsung. You're giving away a Samsung tablet. Yeah. Why is that not good enough?
Yeah, it's like literally like we all know this isn't good enough, and we want to be on Apple. Like that's literally what it feels like. So I know why Fortnite would do it. I'm surprised Samsung would let that campaign go.
I mean, they don't care. Fortnite's the game of the year on their store. This is the most attention their store has probably ever got. This is probably the most Galaxy Tab S7s they've ever shipped. Right? Like this is not their dominant area. Their app store is an also ran. So I'm sure they're loving the little bit of attention they're getting, and I'm sure they've seen an uptick in usage because it's the only place you can play mobile Fortnite. The bigger business question here, William, is does this signal? I believe it does, but I think it signals that this battle is going to continue for a lot longer.
It does,
and B, maybe here's the hot take is Epic is really distracted, if you ask me. Like, this is not what they should be spending their time on. The fact that anyone at Epic Games took the time to put together this package and it looks all custom and free Fortnite and the letter and the jacket and the tablet, like the fact that all of this has been put together, Epic Games has their eye way off the ball. If I'm an investor, I'm really worried now. I don't know what they're doing. Like this has become ego driven now. this is just bad business at this point.
It's not that, Paul. It's like if this were part of a lot of other things they were doing, it would feel smart, right? But
Yeah.
it sort of feels to me like this is all they can do.
Yeah.
Because I get the sense they call up Apple and they're like, "Are you ready to get this sorted?" And Apple's like, "Nope, we are not ready to sort this out. I don't think we ever will be. See you." And they're like, "Well, what do? We can't talk to Apple." You know what it's like? It's like when like the girl or the guy you like, right, like won't talk to you and you don't know what to do. So like you have to go to your friend and you're like, "How about you say how great I am and maybe they'll pay attention to me." So it's like their friend is Samsung and they're like, "Can you say how great we are and maybe Apple will care?" You know, that's what it Samsung's like, "Sure, you're the game of the year." And they're like, "Oh, thanks Samsung. You're the best." But we all know I really care about Apple and not you. You know, doesn't it feel like that? Like, I don't know. It's
It
like
does, but I can't tell you the joy it gives me to see Apple putting Epic in their place. Like I you know, you pick a fight with an elephant, you think the elephant's maybe a little slow, you're nimble, right? You can take him.
yeah.
They got they did not realize Apple was going to punch back, or
No.
worse, not care, right? They're not even they're punching, like not caring is worse than punching back in this case.
I think
Ignoring,
that's
to your
the
point,
bigger
Epic's
problem in all
advances.
of this, Paul. I think the bigger problem is Apple actually doesn't have to care. I don't think
Exactly.
this is getting on. Is it Tim Cook who's the CEO of Apple? Is it like I can't?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think this is like on Tim Cook's memo when he wakes up
No.
and comes into the office at 9 a.m.
No.
And that I think is the biggest pain in all of this is this probably has to get resolved at that level, right? Like it's a serious enough challenge to the App Store. It's a mainstream enough property. You know, there's probably a don't do anything without consulting Tim, right? And it's like not on the docket. You know, he's dealing with like, do we make our own custom GPU cards for all the iBooks we're going to ship? And you know what I mean? Like it's a totally different. So yeah, I think it's tough. I really, and that's why it's this appeal to mass media and influencers is sort of like all you can do. You can ask people to lobby for you. But the problem is, and this is, I think the biggest thing is like it's not like Fortnite went away. Like I think all the people who are already streaming it were streaming it off a PC, you know? So it's like, it's painful because you do sort of need your influencers to have a loss to care here, right? But your leading edge adopters were your marquee people were never doing this on mobile. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so they're not feeling the burn the same way I think you are as a company. You know what I mean? And what's worse is many of your biggest influencers went off of Fortnite to be a multi-game play. So they diversified away from you, you know, case in point, like Ninja, right? Like he's not
Yep.
just a Fortnite streamer, right? So he doesn't care about Fortnite going through this in the same way he used to when his audience entirely depended on Fortnite. So it's a tough situation.
Can I ask the bigger question here, William? Because
Sure.
there's a bigger business question here and a bigger theme here than just free Fortnite, which is how does Epic come back from any of this? Right? They raised a ton of money. So from a business standpoint, they're probably okay, right? They raised $1.5 billion or something like that, which now is looking pretty brilliant because I think if they went out to go raise money today, it would not be at a higher valuation. I think they'd be lucky to get the same valuation as their last round. But they probably don't have to, right? They're probably still sitting on a bunch of cash, I would guess. I don't know what their costs are, but I would guess they're still sitting on a bunch of cash. How does Epic come back? You have a game in decline. You have this fight with Apple. Your esports are fundamentally dead, right? You're not sort of the defining force in the zeitgeist.
Another game.
Yeah, but you always said Fortnite 2 cannot be a thing.
Well, that was back when Fortnite 1 was going to be a platform play and it didn't need to be a thing. I think the reality is, look, you don't get out of this without resolving it with Apple. And I don't know if it gets resolved with Apple or not. I think that's up in the cards, right? Like that's out of your control as Epic. It's with Apple and if they want to resolve it, right? So what do you do from there? Well, you can maybe try to make your IP a platform play, right? But it's certainly a far less appealing platform play like it should have been in the beginning without access to iPhones, right? Like imagine if I told you I'm going to build a democratizing social platform, but it's not going to be on any Apple devices. You know, that avenue is sort of closed off to them, right?
Yep.
What they can do is reboot. go with another IP, another structure. So that doesn't mean throw out Fortnite together, but maybe they make a parallel game that's about the aliens, right? Because isn't there a whole alien invasion plotline of Fortnite? Maybe they spin off Fortnite into, like Music Edition or something. But I think they have to do a little bit of experimentation around the core right now. And they have to maybe look at, ideally it would be, I can't believe I'm saying this, ideally it would be an entirely fresh IP to build off reliance on their core game. Maybe it could be an investment in, say, Rocket League, which has a ton of potential, right, in his own. So there's a lot they could do, but unfortunately, I don't think it's the strategy I would have had for them in 2019, which is build the moat around the Citadel. It's a case of, hey, the store, like the provisions aren't here for winter. You need to go out and forage and see what else you can find. And again, it's still a huge company making a ton of money. This is not like they're in a lot of trouble.
Like I said, I'm sure they have lots of cash. There's no imminent danger. But
yeah, like we have to stress this. Like, where the reason why I'm reacting so negatively to this is because Fortnite was the chosen one. Like it's like that Star Wars line, like, you were the chosen one, Anakin. Like that's what it feels like. It's like they didn't have to do this. They had won.
Apple had the high ground.
Yeah.
What were they thinking? Like,
that's exactly right.
Did they not learn anything from those movies?
Tim Cook's over there. It's over. I have the high ground.
No, but so here's my take on it, and maybe this is a hot take too. I don't think they're in any trouble today, right? They're sitting on a lot of cash. However,
it's a huge game. It's a hugely successful game.
Yes.
Still, despite
However,
everything, it's a massive.
If they want to do one of two things, which is raise another huge round of financing at a huge increase in valuation, right? Like a la Discord, where their valuation doubles. Or if they want to go public, I think two things has to happen. At least two things have to happen at Epic. One, they need to make nice with Apple. And the way that happens is, unfortunately, I think Tim Sweeney has to go. That yes, he may be the brilliant founder, major shareholder of Epic. I don't know actually how much he holds of Epic stock, but the problem is he's a billionaire, okay? He has so much money, he needs to take some of that money off the table and go away and do other things. He's leading the ship down the wrong path, driven by his ego, when he could just go be a super ultra rich guy working on whatever projects he wants. If he wants to make this vendetta against Apple his crusade, he has plenty of money personally to do it. No point dragging his company down the drain with him, right? And because this has become ego driven and not business driven anymore, I think it's reached the point where if I'm Apple, Sweeney has to go before I even think of doing anything. Literally, as punishment, as pushing back against the bully.
You're so vindictive. I know that's your solution, like cut from the top down, but
in this case, he's the guy driving this, William, and it's his ego, and he doesn't care because he's worth billions.
A lot of people in the room, Paul. I don't know if you can put this on, but anyway, I don't necessarily think poking the bear at the time, like, yes, it's proven to be wrong, but I understand the logic behind poking the bear, right? Like I get it. Like, you have an app that is dominating the cultural zeitgeist that people can't live without, that is a key segment for Apple's new device sales and early adopters, right? Like, it's a key segment for, brand loyalty building, like, that can cut them to the core, because you're going right after the first time phone buyers, a lot of these kids, 13, 14, right? Like, and it's a 30% cut, like that, you can straight away get a massive cut to your bottom line, bump to your bottom line. You could basically double the bottom line of your digital item sales if you fought it off. Like, I get the logic behind the fight.
Penny wise, pound foolish, William, is what it was, and it's how I called it.
You were right.
Pure greed.
I did not, but I get the logic behind the fight, and I might have been persuaded to have fought had I been at Epic. I see it, but either way, the fight didn't work out. You have to manage from there.
But my point is, the only way to manage that fight, you have to get rid of the guy who picked it, because he's the enemy to the other camp, right? And he hasn't gone on. He's gone on a crusade, right? Sending out these packages is not, hey, we want to get a better cut for our business, because those conversations would happen behind closed doors. They'd be business conversations. He's made this a crusade. And this is where it becomes problematic. This is emotional. This is ego. This is not business anymore.
Well, we'll see what happens. But I loved the Star Wars references there. We need to do more of that. That was really great. Like,
Can we do one last quick story before we
yeah,
wrap up here,
go
William?
for it, go for it. Wrap up.
And in fact, before I get to this last story, and it's a fun one, I just want to say a quick message. You guys know a sponsor of the podcast is Esports Entertainment Group. If you're looking at getting into the betting space at all, esports betting space, esports entertainment, they're a NASDAQ listed company, fully regulated. I highly recommend taking a look at them. If you've got a Robinhood account, you're an institutional investor, you're a family office, check them out. esportsentertainmentgroup.com. The ticker symbol is GMBL. Now, I will, the disclaimer here, this is just my opinion. It's not a recommendation. I'm not selling stock here. Consult with a licensed professional before you buy any stock. William, let's cover our last topic here. And this is one you called, and I think your take on it has stood the test of time so much that I think it's fascinating. But this one is the surprise meteoric rise of chess in the esports scene. It's from clutchpoints.com. I'm going to quote you on this. And you had said once upon a time that if chess came out today, it would be one of the biggest esports in the world.
That's right. That was what I did say. Yep.
And like chess, for whatever reason, is blowing up on Twitch. There was a signing, which we're not going to get to today, but the Botez sisters, got signed by Team Envy. Where GM Hikaru, who's streams for TSM, we're seeing this explosion of chess, and it's sort of flowed into other things. Like the number one show this year on Netflix was The Queen's Gambit, which was a show about a chess prodigy.
Yeah.
Why is chess? We'll call it chess the esport blowing up, William. What is the underlying phenomenon here?
Because and this is where I go to, like, we're elitist about esports, right? Like I really think chess has all the necessary ingredients to be an esport. It's high skill cap. It is player to player competitive, right? It plays extremely well remotely. Like, it plays well in low latency situations. It plays well with a streaming audience because there's periods of activity and then pause. So it gives you a lot of time to engage with your chat, to discuss, to, like, basically offer strategy and advice. And, probably the most important piece about it is it's actually eminently watchable, right? Like, most of us understand the basic rules of chess. And if you watch it for a couple hours, you'll pick it up, at which point you can get into the streams and follow it, right? So it meets all the same requirements you would have for a new esport. The fact it was invented thousands of years ago doesn't matter. It's a digitized medium. It's ready to go. It works. It should take off. It should. Like, and this is the whole thing about what is and is not an esport. Like, this is why I was sort of arguing you kind of have to put chess as an esport. Like, it did digitize to do the stuff it's doing. And esports could have been around historically, right? Like, poker, in some sense, has a lot of esports potential too. I'd put that out there, and maybe even cite the success of things like Poker Stars and stuff as a precursor to the rise of esports, like an early indicator for what can happen. But yeah, it's like, to me, it's just obvious. I think, there aren't a deep well of classic games that can do what chess is going to do, right? I don't think we're going to be playing bridge anytime soon on Twitch.
Why though?
Because, to be very honest with you, Paul, because I could be wrong, right? Like, bridge, from what I understand, is a high skill cap game.
I love playing bridge, so I don't know.
Yeah.
My uncle was a grandmaster.
I'm willing to be wrong, but I think there is something about just the cultural, like, inculcation of chess that has made it easier to cross this divide, right? Like, enough people knew about it, enough people idolized it. We had the cult of Bobby Fischer and films about chess way before we ever, like, it was enough in the mainstream that it can make this transition more easily. Now, maybe if it continues to dominate and builds in a really big way, we'll see other traditional games that have high skill cap and exhibit the same characteristics crossing over. But fundamentally, I just think chess it's always been well suited for digitalization. I've seen that since battle chess in, like, the 1990s, So, and I do think you have to look at it as an esport, because it's hard for me, because I would characterize something like Hearthstone or Magic as an esport. Magic is a great example. I definitely would characterize Magic as an esport, right? But try to have the argument that Magic Arena is an esport and chess isn't, because on every single parallel they're the same, right down to the game was invented on a paper or traditional like non-digitized medium. Like you don't win. And so that's really opened up my eyes. And yeah, and it's also good because the other thing that's not me is chess is a really good game. There's a reason it's been around for thousands of years. So
can I add that I think when we had some of these conversations very early on in the life of this podcast, people would have to go back to some of the earliest episodes to hear these discussions. But what a lot of them were about, what were the elements that made an esport sustainable over the long term, right? So my first question to you is, do we think chess and other like esports, right, whether it's bridge or Go or whatever, do we think they'll be able to be monetized successfully, right? But then the second sort of curiosity that I had, or at least the thought I had, was the beauty of chess. The beauty of it is that there's no chess 2 or chess 3 coming out. There's no chess with better graphics, right? That committing to this esport, you're in it forever, basically, right? It's been around thousands of years, probably going to be around.
Patched. It's reached its final form, right?
Right.
But I would push back on you massively there, because I don't think that's true. I think, for example, a couple things, right? Since the beginning of time, people have been playing with chess variants, right? And every so often, chess variants get popular. I think if chess gets popular, just like you have League and all random, all mid, you'll see chess variants building out. The other thing is, we talk about chess as a monolithic style of play, but there's a lot of different chess played around the world. Japan has shogi. China has, my understanding, is a variation of Chinese chess with pieces like the cannon that jump in a straight line, right? So like, I also think you might see the category of these strategic piece movement board games expanding. We'll see.
Okay, but meaning for me, if I have an esports team, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm Oxygen and I'm fielding a chess team, I know it's not going anywhere for the next 50 years.
I totally take your point. Like it's safe. Like it's a digitized property that's like done it. It's trend. Like whatever your upside is, you're not sure, but your downside is chess, and you're probably okay with that, right? Yeah.
Right. Overwatch League probably gone in the next year. Chess definitely not. Right. So where's the better bet here? My money would be on chess. I'm
waiting for the $50 million chess broadcasting studio. That's what I need with the chess.
That's true. That's true. What team is going to announce sort of their chess compound?
Yeah, the chess compound with
the chess compound,
life-size bishop, like.
Oh man! On that note, William, that wraps up this week's podcast. It's like I said, guys, it's the holidays coming up. So happy holidays to all our listeners. Merry Christmas to all our listeners. As always, don't forget, we do a live stream every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure to go buy William's book, The Book of Esports. Even if you give it as a gift after the holidays, it's still great. But I wouldn't give it alone. Go buy some Business of Esports merch, businessofesports.shop. Like William's book with a pair of socks. Like, talk about the most awesome gift ever. And
nothing says holiday cheer.
I mean, right. You're going to buy.
Like, honestly, I would like to get that gift. I'm just saying.
Who doesn't love great socks? And more than anything, guys, please leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Tell your friends about the podcast. This year has been a year of incredible growth for us. And this is just a rocket ship that can't be stopped at this point. So we love that you guys are along for the ride. Thank you, William. As always, thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next week.